Have you ever faced a decision so extreme that it defied all conventional morality? A choice so profound that no law, no common sense, and no ethical guideline could possibly justify it. Imagine being commanded to do the unthinkable by a higher power. How would you reconcile such a demand with your own sense of right and wrong? Published in 1843, Fear and Trembling reflects the existential struggles of its author, Søren Kierkegaard, often regarded as the father of existentialism. This period in Kierkegaard's life was marked by personal turmoil, especially his broken engagement to Regine Olsen, which deeply influenced his exploration of fate and ethics. However, the true star of this book isn't Kierkegaard himself, but Abraham. Yes, the guy from the biblical story. When Abraham, childless at 80, prayed for a son, God answered his prayers with the birth of Isaac. But when Isaac turned 30, God commanded Abraham to do the unthinkable, as Abraham prepared to obey and sacrifice his only son. However, at the very last moment, God intervened, instructing Abraham to sacrifice a ram instead. What went through Abraham's mind during this divine test? How could he possibly justify such an action to himself? How does one explain the inexplicable? Stick around to find out. Fear and Trembling can be interpreted as a book about what you can say and on what you must remain silent. The biblical story of Abraham is the central example used in the beginning of the book. What went through Abraham's mind at the moment he was commanded by God to sacrifice his only son? According to Kierkegaard, no one has ever written about it. In Fear and Trembling, he gives 4 different versions of the story, each with a different meaning. The pseudonym Kierkegaard chose for this book is Johannes de Silencio, Johannes who deals with silence. Kierkegaard wants to indicate that for some things there are no words, and it is better to simply remain silent. Or, silently show what you mean. How could Abraham justify to himself that he was about to kill the son he had longed for so much? As I already mentioned, Kierkegaard explores this by showing us 4 different alternative versions of Abraham's story. So, let's take a deeper look. In the first version of the story, Abraham speaks to his son. "Stupid boy, do you think I am your father? I am an idol worshipper. Do you think it's God's command? I am the one who wills it." But meanwhile, Abraham softly says to himself, "Lord God in heaven, I thank you. It is better that he believes that I am a monster than that he loses trust in you." In the second version, Abraham sacrifices the ram and spares Isaac. From that day on, Abraham was old. He could not forget that God had commanded him to do this. Isaac flourished, but Abraham's eyes grew dark and he saw no more joy. In the third version, Abraham goes alone to the top of the mountain, throws himself on the ground and begs God to forgive him for considering sacrificing Isaac and thus failing his ethical duty. And in the fourth version, Abraham does not even begin the sacrifice. He simply returns home with Isaac. Thereupon, Isaac begins to doubt his own fate because of Abraham's refusal to do what God had commanded. These 4 versions of the story illustrate that Abraham will always have to sacrifice something, no matter what he chooses. Johannes de Silencio comments on this. "No one was as great as Abraham. Who can possibly understand him?" That is indeed a puzzling statement. The French philosopher Jacques Derrida dedicated an entire essay that he wrote in 1999 to Abraham's silence. Derrida writes that Kierkegaard, in his 4 versions of the Abraham story, wanted to address what Kierkegaard referred to as the teleological suspension of the ethical. Simply put, sometimes you have a higher goal and cannot adhere to what would be morally responsible. Abraham, says Derrida, according to Kierkegaard, must transcend the moral laws to pass a test from God. He can only do this by remaining silent, for any attempt at justification would immediately entangle him in the trap of moral considerations. There is no human morality that allows the killing of your own child. If you believe that such a murder is a religious duty, you must keep it to yourself. You then carry the secret of your secret within you. You conceal what your task has been and also conceal that you are concealing it. What Abraham realizes, according to Kierkegaard, is that God will never demand that he kills his son just like that. From his religious conviction, Abraham is completely willing to make that sacrifice, but at the same time, he believes that God will somehow give Isaac back to him. That is something Abraham cannot tell anyone, not even his son or his wife. Derrida states that the test God imposed on Abraham consisted precisely in that Abraham would prove that he could keep a secret. Abraham passes this test if he cannot justify his action, for what comes from God cannot be captured in the language of human morality. God demands complete surrender. This ultimate surrender is usually coined the leap of faith, a concept that goes beyond reason and ethics. The leap of faith is one of the most popular terms associated with Kierkegaard's work, which is quite interesting, because he never actually used this expression himself. The exact expression Kierkegaard coins is the qualitative leap. Faith and trust arise from inner passion and enthusiasm, but a conviction is something completely individual and unique. It's a kind of fear and excitement combined. The qualitative leap, or leap of faith, means fully committing to a belief in God, even when it defies all logic and moral understanding. Abraham's willingness to sacrifice Isaac, purely based on his faith in God's command, embodies this leap. He cannot rationalize or explain his action, he simply trusts in God's will without question. This leap requires abandoning the safety of reason and ethical norms, embracing the paradoxes and absurdities of faith. It's an act of profound belief, where the individual places complete trust in the divine, beyond any human comprehension or justification. With the leap, Kierkegaard does not refer to something like enlightenment, as for example Zen Buddhism propagates. For Kierkegaard, there is no form of enlightenment where you suddenly understand everything. The natural world is way too complicated for that. You can get a sudden insight into your own existence and what you are driven by, in your experience of beauty and value, in the coherence of your experiences and your life vision, to name just a few examples. But many people will not appeal to a command from heaven if confronted with a situation like Abraham. They will justify themselves by referring to common sense or the law. But what can they fall back on if the situation is extreme? If reason, law, and norms do not seem to provide the answer? Will they then rely on something else? Something higher? Something more profound? Something that is so authentic that it cannot be explained in words, not before a court and not to your loved ones. That is what Kierkegaard described as the necessity Abraham faced. He had no words and no moral justification for a decision that was such a crucial choice. And with that, we reach the end of the first part of our video on Kierkegaard's fear and trembling. However, dear viewer, do not be saddened by this sudden conclusion, as we are already working on the second part of this video, and we will release it as soon as possible. This video is just the beginning of a series reflecting on Kierkegaard's fear and trembling and his philosophy, so stay tuned for the second part. If you liked this video, please let us know in the comments, give it a thumbs up, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell to stay updated for the next part of this series and more philosophy. Let me also take this time to make you aware of our Ko-fi page. Ko-fi is a platform where content creators like ourselves can receive small donations to support our work. Your support helps us continue to create quality content for you. As always, we are here to serve you philosophy. Till next time, take care.